Excited voices are heard in the garden. They are anxiously asking, the Master, is he here?" The harmonious voice of the landlady replies, "He is upstairs. Who are you? Sick people?" "No, disciples of John, and we want Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus looks out of the window saying, "Peace be with you. Oh, it is you. Come in." They are the three shepherds, John, Matthias and Simon. "Oh, Master," they say, looking up and showing their sorrowful faces. Not even the sight of Jesus cheers them up. Jesus leaves the room and goes out to meet them on the terrace. Manaen follows him. They meet where the staircase leads onto the sunny terrace. The three men kneel down, kissing the floor. Then John, just to be clear, that's John the shepherd, and I'll try to refer to him as such to avoid mixing him up with any other Johns and John the Baptist. Then John says on behalf of them all, "Receive us now, Lord, because we are your inheritance." And tears stream down the faces of the disciple and his companions. Jesus and Manaen utter one cry only, "John? He has been killed." The word drops like a loud, dull noise, which drowns every other noise in the world, and yet it was uttered in a low voice. But it petrifies both him who speaks and those who listen. Just pause there. The use of the word petrified here is commonly for us, it means fear, frozen with fear. But here, actually, it will just mean frozen, almost turned to stone, petrified, petrus. We know that because we are followers of Peter. I should say, for those who may be tuning in as Protestants, I don't want to say we're not followers of Jesus, just that we are subject to Peter and his successors. Okay, to resume. And the earth, upon hearing it and being horrified, seems to interrupt every noise. Such is the period of deep silence and complete immobility in animals, in leafy branches, in the air. Doves stop cooing. Blackbirds interrupt their musical songs. The choir of sparrows is struck dumb, and a chirping cicada suddenly becomes silent, as if its contrivance had broken down unexpectedly, while the wind, which was caressing the leaves of vines and trees, making them rustle like silk and causing poles to squeak, drops completely. I'll just pause for a moment, because it will be easy to pass over this, but Maria Valtorta is observing this. This is what she's saying really happened. When it said John has been killed, it seems like nature freezes. We sometimes see this in movies, science fiction movies. Everything stopped, as if time had been frozen. And so we can say that is a miracle from God the Father, because the significance of John the Baptist cannot be underestimated. And because he only briefly appears, it's easy to underestimate him in the scriptures. And he's not seen that much in Maria Valtorta's work, but there is some more in development of his character and an understanding of his role and who he is and his interaction with Jesus. But he's extremely important. Some say the last prophet of the Old Testament. So it's fitting that nature would stop dead upon it, the news of this great man's murder being told to Jesus. Continuing the narrative. Jesus becomes as pale as ivory, while his eyes dilate, glazing over. He opens his arms, saying, and his voice is deep in the effort to make it steady, "Peace to the martyr of justice and to my precursor." He folds his arms, collects his thoughts in prayer, communicating with the Spirit of God and of the Baptist. Manaen does not dare to make a gesture. Contrary to Jesus, he blushes vehemently and has an impulsion of anger. Then he becomes stiff, and his excitement is revealed by the mechanical movement of his right hand rumpling the cord of his tunic, and of the left one, which unintentionally searches for his dagger. And Manaen shakes his head, pitying his weak mind that does not remember that he'd renounced weapons in order to be, quotes, the disciple of the meek master, near the meek Messiah, unquote. Jesus opens his mouth and eyes again. His countenance, his eyes, his voice have resumed the divine majesty habitual to him. Only a deep melancholy, tempered with peace, hovers about him. Come and tell me, as from today you will be mine. And he takes them into the room, closing the door and half drawing the curtains to have a subdued light and an atmosphere of concentration around the sorrow and the beauty of the Baptist's death, and to form a partition between such perfection of life and the corrupt world. Speak, he tells them. Manaen is still petrified. He is near the group, but does not utter one word. It was the evening of the feast. The event was unforeseeable. Only 2 hours before, Herod had consulted with John and had dismissed him very kindly. And shortly before the murder, the martyrdom, the crime, the glorification, Herod had sent a servant with icy fruit and rare wines for the prisoner. John had distributed everything to us. He never changed his austerity. We were the only ones to be there. Thanks to Manaen, we were in the palace as kitchen servants and stable grooms. And that was a grace, because we could always see our John. John, that is the shepherd, and I were in the kitchen, while Simon supervised in the stables, ensuring that the grooms looked after the mounts of guests properly. The palace was full of important people, military commanders and gentlemen from Galilee. Herodias had locked herself in her rooms after a violent quarrel in the morning with Herod. Manaen interferes. But when did the hyena come? 2 days previously, unexpectedly, saying to the monarch that she could not live away from him and be absent on the day of his feast. Viper and sorceress, as she'd always been, she had made a laughingstock of him. But that morning, although he was already full of wine and lust, Herod refused to give the woman what she asked for with loud cries. But nobody thought it was John's life. She remained disdainfully in her rooms. She sent back the royal dishes that Herod sent to her on precious trays. She kept only a precious one full of fruit, exchanging the gift with an amphora of drugged wine for Herod. Drugged. Her vicious, intoxicated nature was sufficient to drug him for the crime. From the servants waiting at the table, we learnt that after the dance of the mimers, nay, halfway through it, Salome had rushed dancing into the banquet hall, and the mimers, in the presence of the royal girl, had withdrawn against the walls. We were told that her dance was perfect, lewd and perfect, worthy of the guests. Herod, perhaps a new desire of incest was fermenting in his heart. Herod, at the end of the dance, said enthusiastically to Salome, "You've danced very well. I swear that you deserve a prize I swear that I will give it to you. I swear that I will give you anything you may ask me for. I swear it in the presence of everybody. And the word of a king is loyal also without swearing. Ask what you want." And Salome, simulating perplexity, innocence, and modesty, enveloping herself in her veils with bashful gesture after so much impudicity, said, "Allow me, great king, to ponder for a moment. I will withdraw and I will come back later, because your grace has moved me." And she left, going to her mother. Selma told me that she went in laughing, saying, "Mother, you have won. Give me the tray." And Herodias, with a cry of triumph, ordered the slave to give the girl the tray that she'd kept previously, saying, "Go and come back with the hated head, and I will clothe you with pearls and gold." And Selma was struck with horror and obeyed. Salome re-entered the hall dancing, and went to prostrate herself at the king's feet, saying, "Here, on this tray that you've sent to my mother as a token that you love her and you love me, I want the head of John. And I will dance again if it pleases you so much. I will dance the dance of victory, because I have won. I've beaten you, king. I've defeated life, and I am happy." That is what she said, and her words were repeated to us by a friendly cupbearer. And Herod was embarrassed, being caught by two desires: to abide by his promise, to be just. But he could not be just, because he is unjust. He nodded to the headsman who was standing behind the royal seat, and he took from Salome's raised hands the tray, and from the banquet hall went down to the lower rooms. John and I saw him cross the yard, and shortly afterwards we heard Simeon's cry, "Murderers!" And then we saw the headsman pass again with the head on the tray. John, your precursor, was dead. "Simeon, can you tell me how he died?" asked Jesus after some time. "Yes, he was praying. He had previously said to me, 'The two messengers will be back before long, and those who do not believe will believe.'" Just pause for a moment there. These two messengers, it's really important, and perhaps I may, on another occasion, not today, read from that event which involved the two messengers. You'll know from Scripture, and I recall a specific incident from Holy Mass, where John the Baptist, being in prison, he sends two of his disciples to Jesus to ask them, "Are you the one, or are we to wait for another?" And the common view is that, therefore, John the Baptist, in prison, facing death, had doubts. And I say I remember from Holy Mass because this is the approach a priest took, and I was just a bit naffed off with this, to say the least. But it can't be helped. It's the way it goes with the standard biblical commentary. But in actual fact, we learned from Maria Valtorta, and in fact I think at this point I got this view from Anne Catherine Emmerich, because at that point I hadn't yet read Valtorta, if I remember rightly. But what John the Baptist is doing, he believes, never doubted. After all, it'd be strange when you read what he's saying at almost the beginning of the Gospels about Jesus. It's odd to think he would really doubt. But he's got disciples who are seeing him, John the Baptist, in prison, facing death. They're doubting who Jesus is. So John wants them to be strengthened, because they're going to have to go to Jesus after he, John, is dead. And so John sends these men to Jesus with that question, are you the Messiah? Are you the one who's to come, or should we wait for another? So that Jesus will answer them directly, rather than having them be told this by John. And that makes everything consistent in the Gospels. I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole here now, and I'll try not to do so, but with the Blessed Virgin Mary, sometimes Protestants say, often Protestants say, well, look, there was that scene where the family of Jesus with Mary came to bring Jesus back to Nazareth because they thought he was going mad. So Mary had her doubts. That's absurd. It's inconsistent with the Gospel. The angel Gabriel of God himself came and told her who she was going to give birth to, who this person was. It's impossible for Mary to have doubts. Just as it's impossible to consider that John the Baptist had doubts. And that all is made absolutely clear anyway in Maria Valtorta's visions, but we shouldn't really need that, but because of the way the world is and the kinds of faithless commentaries we have to rely on, it's best that we have something else, something from heaven, which is what Maria Valtorta's Poem of the Man God, or the Gospel as revealed to me, is. So I'll just come back out of those rabbit holes and resume the narrative. And I shall recap, because it was quite a bit of a diversion there, or an excursion. Jesus says to the shepherd, or to Simeon, Simeon, can you tell me how he died? Yes, he was praying. He had previously said to me, the 2 messengers will be back before long, and those who do not believe will believe. But remember, should I be no longer alive when they come back, I, on the point of dying, say to you, Jesus of Nazareth is the true Messiah, so that you may repeat it to the others. He was always thinking of you, Jesus. The headsman entered. I uttered a cry. John looked up and saw him. He stood up and said, you can take only my life, but the lasting truth is that it is not legal to do wrong. And he was about to say something to me when the headsman swung his heavy sword while John was standing, and the head fell from the bust in a stream of blood that reddened the goat skin, while his thin face blanched, but his open eyes were still alive and accusing. The head rolled at my feet. I fell at the same time as his body, as I fainted with grief. After Herodias had disfigured it, the head was thrown to the dogs. But we picked it up at once, and we tied it up. But we picked it up at once, and we tied it in a precious veil, together with the trunk. And during the night, we recomposed the body and carried it out of Machaerus. We embalmed it at daybreak in a nearby acacia thicket with the help of other disciples. But it was taken from us again to be slashed, because she cannot destroy it and cannot forgive him. And her slaves, fearing death, were more ferocious than jackals in taking the head from us. If you'd been there, Manaen. Had I been there. But that head is her malediction. Nothing is taken from the glory of the precursor, even if the body is mutilated. Is that right, Master? That is true. Even if the dogs had destroyed it, his glory would not change. Neither has his word changed, Master. His eyes, although disfigured under a large wound, still say, "You are not allowed." But we have lost him, says Matthias. Just a pause there. That phrase, "you are not allowed," and the phrase before him, it is the phrase before that, we said, where John the Baptist, just before he was beheaded, says, the lasting truth is that it is not legal to do wrong. This was John focusing on the illegal marriage between Herod and Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. And so it's not legal. And as Simeon, as Matthias saying in giving some information about this, the eyes, though disfigured, still say, you are not allowed.